Today in our message, I want to ask you a question. I like starting off a lot of my messages with questions. Have you ever wanted something to be different? Just in your life, in your situation, what you might like look at your shoes and be like, I wish I had different shoes. I love Ava's shoes that she's wearing this morning. I don't know that I would wear them personally, but they look great on her. I like when you look at things in your life, some of them small, maybe some of them really big. You might think, I wish that was different. Now, sometimes there's a difference in wishing that my shoes were different, and I go out and just buy different shoes. Sometimes we have situations in our lives where they're not going to change overnight, right? They're going to take some work. And that's the title of today's message, Work in Progress, how God builds what he promised. I believe we're all work in progress, that we all have things that we need to have different in our lives. Some of those are not as easy as others. Almost 2 years ago in the spring, Denise and I, our family, we bought a house here in Raytown, and we love the house. The second we saw it, we went and walked through with the realtor. That whole process, we really liked it. We looked at some other houses, but we knew this one was the one. And really, for me, the thing I like about it is it's a quirky house. It's kind of a strange house. I like things that are different. It wasn't a cookie cutter house. It's an old house. It was built way back in the 50s, and so it's got some strange things about it. It's got some really neat things about it. But I remember when we went and looked at it for the first time, we drove up, and there on the road, like the yard, there's kind of a hump off of the road and a slope that goes down to the front yard. And the people who had it before us, what they had done is they had just piled up a bunch of rocks there by the road. Literally a like, when I say a ton of rocks, it's like tons of rocks that they just put there. And I remember looking at it the first time, and I'm thinking, that's interesting. It was like early spring. I thought, well, that's kind of different. Maybe we could do something, eventually plant some flowers around it or something. And the longer we were there, the more I looked at that pile of rocks. And the longer we were there, it turns into spring, into summer, and a bunch of weeds and ivy cover those rocks. And I decide one day I'm going to clear the ivy and all of that stuff out. And I found that there was a particular kind of ivy in those rocks. And I did not prepare for or take precautions for, that I somehow thought I was immune to. I didn't wear long pants or gloves or long sleeves. Instead, I was just ripping stuff out and piling it all up. And that summer, I pretty much spent that summer covered in poison ivy. So I really then didn't like that pile of rocks that was there. And so I spent all of last winter pretty much thinking, what can I do differently about these rocks? And I kind of came up with a vision, a dream of what I wanted it to be. And so this last spring, I set out on a project. Now, have you ever started a project where you thought, this isn't going to take very long? This should be pretty easy. And then as you get into it, you realize, oh, this is going to be the opposite of that. In fact, the exact opposite of that. And so I want to show you a picture of what we started with. Chad, if you'll put that picture. This is my pile of rocks that was out there. It's a large pile of rocks. My plan was to take those rocks and to build a wall out of them. And that was the extent of my vision. I had a picture somewhat in my mind, and I thought this will probably take about a week or so. And the more I got into it, I'm like, this is not going to take a week. This is going to take a really, really long time. But when I looked at that pile of rocks, I had a little bit of a dream. I could see the finished product to an extent in my mind. And then I picked up the shovel and I started to dig. I realized this is going to take more than just a vision, more than just a dream. This is going to take some serious time and some serious digging. Some serious digging. I think that we all want new things in our lives. We want new things. We want new things to happen. We want new things to start. The problem oftentimes is we want new things, but nobody wants the process, right? We love the idea of transformation, but we forget that transformation takes time, and it takes sweat, and it takes perseverance. In other words, it takes not giving up. You see, when we want something different, when we want something new, it starts with a shovel, not a shortcut. It starts with a shovel and not a shortcut. Would you look with me at Luke chapter 6, verses 47 and 48? Transformation begins when we move from dreaming to digging. From dreaming to digging. Luke chapter 6, 47 and 48. This is Jesus speaking. He says, I will show you what someone is like who comes to me, who hears my words and acts on them. He is like a man building a house who dug deep and laid the foundation on the rock. When the flood came, the river crashed against that house, could not shake it, because it was well built. You see, the dreams, the things that we want to be different, dreams show us what could be. Right? I had that dream of what this big old pile of rocks that turned out to be a whole lot more rocks than I bargained for, than I thought I was going to have to move, because I just had a dream of taking a few rocks and stacking them up into a wall, and it would be great. But then I have to realize, how am I going to do that? You see, dreams show us what could be, but then when you start digging, digging shows you what it takes to get there. I almost brought the shovel with me. I actually bought a new shovel at the beginning of this project, because the shovel that I had, I realized this is not going to cut it. This is not going to get it done. I got to get a new shovel. I almost brought it with me because it's become my new best friend. We have spent a lot of time together. I've actually thrown that shovel a couple of times in that process. God gives you a vision to pull you forward, but He'll put a shovel in your hand to do something else. He'll put a shovel in your hand to shape your character. Because you can't build new on just an old surface. I realized before I can stack a single rock, I've got to dig down and make a foundation. Otherwise, this rock and the first big, this wall and the first big rain is going to get swept away, right? So you saw the picture there with the pile of rocks. There was an old truck in the background. That was Victor's truck. I borrowed that truck a lot in this process. I am sure that he is tired of this text message. Hey, Victor, can I borrow your truck? Can I borrow your truck? Can I borrow your truck? My first goal was to take every single rock there at the front and to just simply have a holding place for them. So I loaded up that truck with most of the rocks that were there. And then I just realized how many rocks there were. And in that moment, I realized I am in slightly over my head here. This dream is bigger than what I thought it was going to be. But I'm going to move forward. I am going to start digging, because before I could stack a single rock, I had to start digging out and moving what was in the way. Just like when we want something different, we have to allow Him to start digging things up in our lives, because we need to deal with them. So we have to let Him dig up pride and dig up patterns and dig up pain before God can ever build anything new with a new purpose. And friends, a lot of times that takes a while. That's a slow process. But we can't don't mistake slow for being stuck. Slow can seem overwhelming. Slow can seem like, man, I'm just inching my way along, and this is not going nearly fast enough. And that's a lot of what I spent as I would run into things that didn't allow me to keep working on my project. I was short on time, because this project now I realize is going to take a whole lot longer. But we can't mistake slow for stuck, because transformation doesn't start with speed. Transformation is not about how fast can this take place. How fast, God, will you transform me? Instead, it starts with something else. It starts with surrender. You see, maybe you've been praying for God to change your life, and maybe He's already answered you. And the way that He's answered you is He's shown up and He said, hey, friend, here's a shovel. Are you ready to get to work with me, because the foundation the foundation comes way before the finish. The foundation comes way before the finish. Lasting change actually starts underground. It's unseen, but it's essential. 1 Corinthians 3:11 says this: No one can lay any foundation other than the one already laid, which is Jesus Christ. Friends, when we start to talk about change, wanting things to be different in our lives, there is only one place that it can start, and that is with Jesus. And so what I did in this project is I dug, and I dug, and I dug, and I moved dirt, and some of the youth group kids came over to help me at times, and we just dug, and we dug, and we dug, because we needed to get a foundation. And so what was really interesting along this way as we were digging, is neighbors would walk by. The mailman would come by. And wouldn't you know it, everybody had an opinion on what I was doing. They wanted to know what I was doing, and I would tell them, and they go, huh, okay, well, are you going to do it this way? No, I wasn't planning on doing it that way. Huh, well, that's how I would do it. Really? Well, I have an extra shovel here. Would you like to help me? Oh, no, I'm just saying I might do it a little bit different. Friends, when you set out to change, and you start digging, and you start working on a foundation, and a foundation that is centered around Jesus Christ, you will have a lot of people give you different opinions. They will tell you to do things differently. They will tell you to give up on that. Jesus isn't working fast enough for you. He's not changing things quickly enough. Maybe you should do something different. But we have to remember, no one can lay any foundation other than the one already laid, which is Jesus Christ. And so that's what we set out to do. I set out to do is dig a foundation. I think we have a picture of, there's a little bit of the foundation. I was really happy with that because I got a big rock down there and I was excited. Here's kind of like my cornerstone for this wall. Dug down a foot into the ground and put a bunch of gravel in there and gave it something solid to start on, because you see, you can't stack what you haven't secured. I couldn't just restack the rocks. I couldn't just take them out and put them on the ground. I had to dig down. I couldn't start with just any old rock. I needed to find a good one. If I didn't dig deep enough, everything I built would collapse. Now, God's foundation work can often feel like it's a delay. I got really excited when I dug this, me and Edison, I think Markel helped one day, we dug this first row. And I was really excited about it. It's 25 feet long, and a foot or so, 18 inch, something like that, deep. And it was one trip after another to get more gravel. And I used John's trailer, and he said, "When are you going to bring my trailer back, buddy? You've had it a long time." And I said, "Well, I got Victor's truck full over here of rocks. I can't use it. I need a truck." You know, they blessed me a lot with the things that they let me borrow. 25 feet was a long time to dig. A lot of dirt to move, a whole lot more dirt than I thought it was going to be. And I was really excited, but with that foundation, I kept looking at the rest of the process, and I realizing new things about the process, and this is going to take much longer. God's foundation work often feels like delay, but it's actually design. The process is all part of God's design. What feels hidden, this rock, you can't see it anymore, right? Are we still in that picture? You can't see that rock anymore. You can see it just a little bit above the ground, right? But if that rock wasn't there, in a series of large rocks and the gravel that's underneath, then there's no stability. What feels hidden is what is anchoring your stability. See, a strong foundation, it doesn't look flashy, but it holds everything. When Jesus is the foundation, what you build may take longer, but it's going to last much longer. Before God shows the world what he is building through you, that thing that you desire to be different, that thing that you want to change, before God reveals all of that to the world through your life, he strengthens what he's building in you. He wants to strengthen his relationship with you. He wants to strengthen that anchor that everything in your life is now held down by, which is Jesus Christ. But there's a piece to that. because we like the sound of that. And I want something different. And you know what? It does sound good to build it around Jesus. Jesus wants good things for me. I want good things in my life. It makes sense with that. I'm even willing to dig down a little bit and put in the work and put in the time with the shovel to build this foundation. I'm ready to do that, Pastor. But here's the thing. You can't build new until you deal with what has been buried. Real transformation requires removing some stuff. Oftentimes, it's the old roots that still run deep. This first row wasn't very hard to build, but as I moved out these rocks, I realized this is a pretty good slope coming down here. I don't like how this will turn out. I think it will be bad for erosion, and so something else occurred to me. I'm going to have to dig and make a second wall. And I'm going to have to connect these walls. The first row was not hard to dig. The second row was a nightmare to dig. As I started digging that out, it felt like every time I would put my shovel into the ground, I would hear a clink. I would hit something really hard, either a huge rock. I kept uncovering more and more and more rocks. But then I started running into some other things. I started running into some really big roots, tree roots that I didn't know had ever even been there. I started running into stumps. I remember messaging John one day, John, how do I take a stump out? Because I've run into a stump. That took a lot more digging. Real transformation requires removing the old roots that still run deep. Hebrews 12:1 tells us this. It says, let us throw off everything that hinders and the sin that so easily entangles. Friends, the sin that so easily oftentimes gets us entangled is sin that has its roots buried deep in our lives. Jeremiah 1:10 says, see, I have appointed you today over nations and kingdoms to what? To uproot and to tear down, to destroy and to overthrow, to build and to plant. You see, old roots, they can still cause something. One, they can still cause a problem, right? They can still cause new resistance. So when I'm trying to change and I'm trying to do better and I'm trying to make it different, when I run into those old roots as I'm digging down, and I thought, I haven't even thought about this in a long time. I haven't thought about that relationship. I haven't thought about that person. I haven't thought about that sin in a really long time. But those roots are still there. And so when they show up, and Satan, he's so good at showing up at just the right time. And now all the new work that I've been building and digging for has caused new resistance. I kept hitting roots from bushes and trees. There were no bushes and trees there. They were just rocks, bushes and trees that weren't even there anymore. Some of us are tripping over what's already been cut down because we never dealt with what's been underground. We've never dealt with what's deeply buried within us. And friends, it's time to let God dig down deep and remove some of those roots. Remove the roots that are going to cause new resistance. You see, what God removes, what God wants to remove, we still have to let go. What God desires to remove, we have to release, right? We maybe, as we rediscover this stuff, we start to grip on to it tightly. I don't want to let go of that person. I don't want to deep down let go of the possibility of that relationship being rekindled. I don't want to let go of my spending habits, God. I don't want to let go of this sin that I have in my life. You see, just because it's gone from your life, just because you haven't turned to it in a long time, doesn't mean that it's gone from your heart. Just because it's gone from your life and hasn't shown up in a long time doesn't mean that it's gone from your heart. Now, friends, a lot of times, what keeps it in our heart, what keeps the sin there, what keeps the possibility of us going back to it, is because really there's bitterness in our hearts. And friends, you can't plant freedom where bitterness is still rooted. You can't start new and you can't start fresh where bitterness is still rooted deeply. And you might think, well, Pastor, I'm not bitter about things. But I bet that situation that maybe you want to be different. I bet the relationships that have gone poorly. When God starts to dig down and things start to come back up, you'll start to feel some bitterness of God, why haven't you fixed this yet? Why haven't you taken care of this yet? I've been praying for a long time. God, why haven't you changed this yet? Bitterness is still rooted, and typically when things haven't happened as quickly as we would like them to, that's because we have still not allowed ourselves to learn the thing that God is trying to teach us. Oftentimes, God changed them. Make them be different. Guess where God usually starts? He starts with us, right? He said, I can change them, but you got to let me change you too. And God won't build where you won't let him dig. A lot of times we keep things off limits to God. We say, God, you can have a whole bunch of my life. Just don't tell me to be different here. God, you can have a lot of me, but deep down, you can't have all of me. You see, the deeper the roots run, the longer the process. But if we stick with that process, then it also leads to stronger growth. You see, as I would dig and I'd pull out the big rocks and I'd run into roots, these are not little bitty roots. These are like logs. And so in some cases, I get an axe out and I'm hacking away at them. In some cases, I've got a Sawzall and I'm cutting them out that way. Because these roots are so big and there's so much there. So, Chad, I think there's another picture. So this whole area, this was like the first row, and these are big rocks that I uncovered along the way. And I decide right here is where I'm going to start that second row. And that's where I run into all of the roots. All of these things that I wish weren't in the way. You see, uprooting hurts. It hurt my back to dig those roots out, right? I cannot tell you how much sweat was poured out. Because now I'm moving into the summer and it's hot. Uprooting hurts. But allowing God to uproot the things that are laid deeply in our hearts that should not be there, that he desires to remove. It might be painful, but it is holy work. Before God grows the garden, before he builds the things that he wants to build in your lives, the first thing he does is he clears the ground out. He has to make room for him to work. And guess who has to allow him to make that room? We have to allow him to make that room. So there I was, thinking in that first week this wasn't going to take very long. Thinking, I'm going to be done digging soon. I'm going to get this cleared. I'm going to get this ground cleared out. I laid that first foundation. I started stacking the rocks. But every time I was ready to move forward, I was ready to be done with this work, I would hit another root. And remember, it wasn't even something that was alive anymore. It was the leftover system of something that used to be there. And that's when God showed me, this is why transformation takes time. Because he's not changing just your situation. What he desires to change is you, is your heart, is your soil. Because guys, we love the idea of God making us new until he starts digging into what's been buried. But if you don't deal with the roots, they're going to choke out and they're going to cause problems for what he's trying to grow within you. And listen, that doesn't mean that you are failing when these roots come up and think, I haven't even thought about this in a long time. Maybe I give in to that temptation that hasn't been there a long time. It doesn't mean that you're failing. It means that God is still working. See, that's the moment where most people quit. And I had those moments digging this. I thought, can I just leave it at this and just be done? And I thought, no, this now looks worse than what I even started with. I can't stop. But if we're honest with ourselves in spiritual growth and in transformation, when we want things to be different and we start out and it gets tough and things start coming up that we need to deal with, that's when most of us quit. When it's too hot, when it's going too slow, when the roots run deeper than what we thought they did. But what if the proof that you're actually in progress is the fact that you are still digging? I didn't finish that wall that's now turned into 2 walls overnight. As I was telling people about it here at church, they'd say, "Are you done yet? Are you done yet?" What's taking so long? What's taking so long? Some days I just get one little section done. But every time I picked the shovel back up, I was participating in the promise. Every time we pick that shovel back up with God and say, "God, I'm ready for you to dig deeper," we're participating in the promise. Because transformation isn't what happens when you're done. It's what happens when you don't give up, when you don't stop. And so I want to show you now another picture. This is a picture, Chad, see, this is what it looks like now. It's not completely done. There's still work that needs to be finished. There's still things that need to be added. And friends, isn't that the point of our life? We're not perfect. We ourselves are not finished. But now I have proof of something I didn't give up on. I kept digging. I kept working. Proof that God's work in you is worth the digging, is worth the delay, and worth the perseverance. Philippians 1:6 says, "He who began a good work in you will carry it on to completion." And I want to encourage you to trust the process of transformation. Not just the promise, not just the dream even of something new, but to trust the process of transformation. Denise, if you would come in our time of response. Friends, if you would stand with me. I don't know what it is that you walked into this room with. Maybe you are here and it feels like I just have a big pile of rocks and I don't know what to do. I want it to be different, but I'm just not sure how to do it. I'm not sure where to start. Maybe you're here and you think, I started a while back, but I got into the middle of it and realized this is going to be more work than what I wanted to have, than what I bargained for. And now I feel like I've just kind of stalled out. I've just stopped. Maybe even I've just given up, right? Maybe I came a long ways. Maybe I've gotten to this point, but it's not done yet. There's still plants that need to be planted. There's still some more rocks that need to be stacked. There's still some more gravel that needs to be gotten. I just feel like I just can't finish what I started. I just can't finish what God even started within me. Friends, if you would bow your heads and close your eyes, and I would ask you to just consider what God has placed on your heart this morning. The place that you might be at and what you desire to be different. Maybe, you know what, maybe you feel like I've tried Jesus before and I've tried to allow him to cause things to be different in my life, but I prayed a prayer one time and nothing really changed. When I left the church, when I left that place, I went back and nothing was different. Friends, transformation, change, new, it's a process. It doesn't happen overnight. Instead, it happens with small steps. Small steps of perseverance that say, this is where I usually stop. This is where I usually give up. But friend, what if you took that next step? And what if you didn't give up? What if you kept going in the change and the transformation with God? Maybe you're here, and as we've talked about Jesus and talked about laying a foundation on him, Maybe you don't know what that means because you don't know him. I would invite you and encourage you to take that step of inviting Jesus into your life and being willing to give him everything, every part of you. Will that be the easiest thing in the world to do? It won't, because this life is difficult. This life is hard. And it's not the easiest thing to do to choose Jesus every single time. But I promise you, it's the very best thing that you can do. Father, this morning, Lord, as you've put these things in front of us, this idea of transformation, this idea of change. Lord, we all desire things in our lives to be different. Situations, habits, sin that we might have in our lives. Father, you've brought it to our attention. You've put it in front of us that change, transformation, going from one thing over here and being transformed into something completely different takes time. It takes a lot of digging. It takes a lot of revealing things in our lives, in our hearts that we might not even know are there. It takes a lot of work, a lot of perseverance. But Father, the end result with you is worth it. That transformation at the end is worth it. And so, Father, whatever each one of us has today that we desire to be different, Lord, I pray that we would be willing to give that over to you.